Ukrainian Drive ones skimmed into view, slicing through the cold Arctic air just 300 feet above ground level. They weren't high-tech marvels. No satellite uplinks, no stealth coding, just low-cost, rugged machines flying with purpose and precision. From a distance, they looked like oversized toys. But what they carried wasn't play, it was a $500 million physics lesson aimed squarely at Russia's most elite air defense system. Flying nap of the Earth, the drones slipped beneath radar beams, hugging the terrain with brutal efficiency. They didn't rely on brute force or billion-dollar budgets. They relied on silence, speed, and science. And they were just minutes away from turning Russia's pride, the S-400 Triumph, into a smoking ruin. This wasn't a display of overwhelming power. It was a demonstration of calculated defiance, of how understanding terrain, curvature, and radar limitations can turn cheap machines into precision weapons. The Russians had built a fortress of steel, code, and missiles. The Ukrainians had sent a whisper of wings to show them how fragile it really was. No warning sirens, no jet roar, just the soft hum of propellers slicing Arctic wind. Beneath the calm surface of the Russian sky, a war had already begun. Not in the air Russia controlled, but in the blind spot they never imagined could be weaponized. And the countdown to detonation had already started. By the time the drones crossed the tree line near Blaya Air Base, it was already too late. The S-400 Triumph system, Russia's crown jewel of air defense, never stood a chance. Not because it malfunctioned, but because physics made it blind. The first line of detection, the NEBO-M VHF radar, was active. It's designed specifically to detect small, low-observable targets like drones. But there's a catch. While longer wavelengths can see smaller objects through resonance effects, the trade-off is poor resolution. At its current setting, the beam width covered hundreds of meters. That means the system could sense something was out there, but not with enough precision to track, lock, or guide a missile. And the drones? They weren't playing by traditional rules, flying at just 300 feet above ground. They exploited a fundamental flaw in radar physics, the curvature of the Earth. Ground-based radar can't see past the horizon. So while the S-400 boasts a range of 250 kilometers on paper, at low altitude that shrinks to just 25 miles or less. In effect, the drones were beneath the radar's line of sight. They flew in the radar's blind spot under its nose. The irony is brutal. Russia had invested billions into a network of sensors and interceptors. But none of it mattered when the attack came from the one direction their technology couldn't watch below. The S-400 was built to shoot down fighters at 60,000 feet, not $5,000, drones skimming frozen grass. It wasn't a flaw in the code. It wasn't sabotage. It was the limits of physics, and Ukraine just turned those limits into a weapon. As the drones slipped past the radar horizon, they entered what should have been a death zone, a mere 1.2 miles from the Blaya Air Base perimeter. But for the S-400 system, this was the one place it couldn't fight. Ironically, the world's most advanced long-range surface-to-air missile system had a fatal flaw. It couldn't engage targets too close. The S-400's massive 4.8N6E3 interceptor missiles require at least 2 kilometers to arm their proximity fuses and stabilize aerodynamically. These drones were inside that range, using speed and low altitude to turn the S-400's strength into irrelevance. It was like trying to use a sniper rifle in a knife fight, and the rifle was bolted to the floor. The Panzer S-1 systems meant to protect the S-400 fared no better. Their radar arrays were still rotating, desperately trying to track the incoming swarm. But at 50 meters per second, the drones crossed the 2-kilometer gap in just 40 seconds. Acquisition, IFF interrogation, turret slewing, missile launch, it all takes time. Time the Panzer didn't have. By 6:16 a.m., the first drone slammed into the S-400's radar array. Then another, and another. Explosions ripped through the battery's heart like a chain reaction. Flames licked the Arctic air. Debris twisted and flung skyward metal shards. Shattered optics, circuit boards scattering like ash at a funeral. The eyes of Russia's most elite air defense system had been blinded, burned, and buried in silence. It wasn't just a tactical failure. It was a symbolic funeral for an aging doctrine. a billion-dollar defense system defeated not by stealth bombers or fifth-gen jets, but by a $5,000 propeller drone with a camera, a warhead, and a good understanding of physics. Russia didn't just lose hardware that morning. It lost the illusion of invincibility. Just minutes after Blaya's fiery collapse, the next target stood bracing for impact: Owenia Air Base, deeper in the Arctic. But this time, the enemy wasn't just airborne. It was in the air itself. The temperature had dropped to 10 Fahrenheit, and what should have been an advantage for the defenders became a silent saboteur. As Ukrainian drones approached low and fast, Owenia's Pantsir S-1 systems were powered on, but sluggish. The hydraulic fluid inside their turret actuators had thickened into something closer to molasses. Traverse rates dropped from 60 degrees per second to under 20. The twin 30mm autocannons, meant to spew out 5,000 rounds per minute, choked and jammed after a few hundred. Radar operators stared at screens that flickered with phantom images. Atmospheric inversion layers, caused by the severe cold, bent radar waves, like a prism, creating multiple ghost targets at different altitudes. Drones appeared to hover at 500 feet, then ground level, then vanish, while in reality, they were gliding straight toward the base. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian drones thrived. Their lithium iron phosphate, LFP batteries, delivered full power in the bitter cold. No hydraulics to freeze, no complex moving parts to seize up. Just simple brushless motors and thermal cameras that lit up the frozen airfield like a Christmas tree, every warm engine, every generator glowing through the frost. A few desperate shots rang out, a missile launched, but sensors calibrated at room temperature faltered, oscillators drifted, proximity fuses missed their mark, and then the drones hit. While the S-400 at Blaya was destroyed by physics, Owenia was undone by nature itself. The cold didn't just freeze the equipment, it froze the defense, allowing simple drones to tear through a base that never saw them coming. What came next was not just destruction, it was combustion at a molecular level. With Owenia's defenses frozen in place and radar screens blind from thermal distortion, the Ukrainian drones slipped in almost effortlessly. Their targets were precise, the aviation fuel tanks. At 10 Fahrenheit, steel behaves very differently. It becomes brittle, rigid, almost glass-like. And when exposed to a sudden 4,500 Fahrenheit blast from a drone warhead, it doesn't just rupture, it shatters. The first drone punched directly into one of the main tanks. The explosion wasn't just loud, it was surgical. The steel shell fractured into thousands of supersonic shards. Those shards, still burning hot, sliced into nearby tanks, valves, and pipeline systems. The effect was chain detonation, a cascading fuel-air bomb spreading across the base like wildfire with a memory. Pipes cracked from thermal shock, valves disintegrated under pressure, and one explosion became 6, then 12. The entire underground fuel system, designed to sustain air operations for weeks, had just been turned into a miles-long fuse network. And then, the cameras in orbit caught it. From space, Owenia lit up the Arctic like a second sunrise. Not a flash, but a slow, growing bloom of fire, orange against white. The fuel burned through hangars, across taxiways, under snow-dusted camouflage nets. Smoke billowed into the upper atmosphere, forming a trail that could be tracked from 200 miles away. What ice had softened, fire now consumed. In less than 5 minutes, Owenia was no longer an air base. It was a crater with heat signatures too hot for satellites to properly image. It wasn't just an attack. It was a lesson in thermodynamics, delivered by drone. If Owenia burned from the brutality of fire and cold, then what happened next at Diaghilev Air Base was something far more terrifying. Mathematical collapse. Diaghilev wasn't just another target, it was a fortress. Overlapping S-400 batteries, Pantsir S-1 units guarding every approach, electronic warfare systems jamming across every band, even old-school ZSU cannons loaded and ready. On paper, this base was impenetrable. But at 6:25 a.m., 31 Ukrainian Drive 1s entered the battle space and instantly rewrote the rules. They didn't come in one wave. They broke into 7 independent swarms, each with 4 to 5 drones, approaching from different directions, at different altitudes, and at slightly different speeds. The goal wasn't chaos, it was controlled overload. Every time two swarms merged or split, the automated targeting systems had to restart their tracking algorithms. Fire control computers designed for clean, predictable inputs were thrown into a frenzy of recalculation. Every second spent updating trajectories was a second lost. And at 50 meters per second, those drones were covering over 1,900 feet in the time it took to blink. For each target the Pansirs could track, two more entered the engagement zone. For every S-400 lock-on, another group drifted beneath the radar horizon. This wasn't artificial intelligence in the Hollywood sense. It was basic rule-based logic drones, maintaining formation, avoiding collisions, and exploiting gaps. But in a distributed mesh network, with each drone sharing real-time updates through microburst transmissions, the effect was devastating. The most integrated air defense base in western Russia was being out-communicated by $5,000 flying computers. And for every missile launched, every radar activated the drones were already gone, out of sight, out of range, or worse, already overhead. If Diaghilev was defeated by swarm logic, Ivanova was undone by something even more advanced, drones that no longer needed to be told what to do. At 6:42 a.m., Ivanovo Air Base, the final stronghold, was on full alert. After watching three bases vanish in flames, every system was live. Jammers blanketed the skies. The R-330ZH Jatel electronic warfare array pumped out GPS denial signals. Inflatable decoy aircraft lined the tarmac, radiating heat signatures meant to fool infrared sensors. It was the most fortified electronic defense net in western Russia. And it didn't matter, because the drones attacking Ivanovo weren't relying on GPS. They weren't receiving commands from a satellite or operator. They were navigating by vision just like you walk through your own neighborhood. Each drone carried a neural network trained on thousands of satellite images of Ivanovo at all times of day, across seasons, from every angle. With a simple onboard processor running deep learning image recognition at 30 frames per second, they knew exactly where they were. They didn't need maps, they recognized landmarks, and they didn't fall for decoys. While the inflatable aircraft glowed on thermal scopes, the drones ignored them, spotting inconsistencies in shadow angles, antenna placement, and engine heat signatures. They shared findings instantly through encrypted mesh networks, coordinating strike angles, warhead types, and priority targets. When one drone identified a nuclear-capable Tuesday 95 bomber, the rest adjusted. Penetrator drones dove toward hardened shelters. Fragmentation drones swept across exposed airframes. Others aimed for fuel nodes and wing routes where a single blast could take out the entire structure. This wasn't remote warfare. It was algorithmic precision. No human eyes. No command links. Just autonomous machines with one mission. Find the real, ignore the fake, and make it burn. By 6:47 a.m., the battlefield had fallen silent, if only because there was nothing left to burn. Blea, Oenia, Diaghilev, and now Ivanovo had all been struck in less than 40 minutes. The damage was staggering. Three of Russia's most fortified air bases effectively neutralized, over $1 billion in strategic hardware destroyed, and more than 20 long-range bombers, including nuclear-capable Tuesday 95-second, reduced to melted steel. But the most devastating blow wasn't material, it was doctrinal. These attacks weren't carried out by hypersonic missiles, stealth fighters, or space-based assets. They were led by drones, many of them built from off-the-shelf components, powered by lithium iron phosphate batteries, and guided not by satellites but by deep learning and atmospheric awareness. No high-tech comms, no real-time commands, just cold logic, adaptive movement, and raw environmental exploitation. Russia's billion-dollar defenses failed, not because they lacked power, but because they couldn't adapt. Radar arrays were tricked by curvature and cold. Missile systems were caught inside their own engagement minimums. Jammers were outpaced by frequency-hopping drones. And fire control computers collapsed under swarm dynamics their engineers never planned for. The lesson here is brutal in its simplicity. The future of warfare doesn't belong to whoever has the biggest weapons it belongs to. Whoever understands the battlefield better. A snowstorm became cover. A fuel line became a fuse. $100 processor outmaneuvered $1 billion network. They built walls of steel and code, expecting to keep the sky safe, but they never imagined the enemy would fly beneath